Welcome to Competitive Analysis 101, turning public data into competitive advantage. My name is Chris Penn, co-founder and chief data scientist of Trust Insights. Let's get started. We have a problem when it comes to competitive analysis, specifically competitive analysis data. When asked, CEOs of the world's largest companies were asked by PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2019 what information they viewed as critical or important, and then what information did they have in a comprehensive fashion. And when we look at these two lines, the yellow lines, 3 of the 6 top responses are competitive analysis questions. CEOs care about data about the brand and reputation of the company, data about the risks to which the business is exposed, benchmarking data on the performance of your industry peers. Across the board, 90%, 87%, 84%, CEOs care very much about this information. Are they getting it? When you look at the bottom yellow lines, 24%, 22%, 18%, they're just not getting it. They're not getting the information that they want in order to make good decisions when it comes to competitors. When CMOs were asked, the chief marketing officers were asked in the August 2019 CMO survey about the quality of capabilities that they have, quality of knowledge assets they had, on a scale of 1 to 7, competitive intelligence was in the middle of the pack. It was not great. So this is not, these are not good situations to be in. It causes us to waste a lot of time when it comes to understand competitors, and prevents us from making decisions in a timely manner. Why? Why are we having these problems? Well, we struggle with a few different problems when it comes to competitive analysis. Number one, we struggle with our ability to use analytics in general. When asked in that same CMO survey, CMOs said that how often does your company make decisions with data? Only 4 out of 10, 39.3%, 4 out of 10 CMOs said their companies make decisions with data. That's appalling. When you think about that, that's like saying 6 in 10 are what? Guessing? Making things up? We don't know, but it's not good. So being able to make use of the data is obviously a core problem here. And then what data is available in order to be able to do competitive analysis is getting more and more difficult. We see that, for example, Jump Shot and Rand Fishkin over at SparkToro did this study last year saying that over 50% of Google searches end without a click to somebody else's content. So if you're relying on click tracking to make a competitive judgment, very difficult to see just how interested that a company's audience is in it when you're looking at a competitor. When you look at social media data, that's even worse. We did a study last year. Out of 3,700 brand accounts on Facebook, 1 out of every 4,600 followers engages with a piece of content. So if you're trying to do competitive analysis just with social data or just with search data alone, you're not going to get statistically relevant answers. It's very, very difficult to do that. And that means that in turn, we can't really judge how our competitors are doing when it comes to getting attention, and whether or not it's having any impact on their businesses. And of course, no attention means no business, right? We are simply not able to make good competitive judgments. The impact of this, no surprise, right? When it comes to understanding why competitive analysis is important and what happens when we get it wrong, our targeting goes haywire. We're not able to do any kind of effective decisions, and of course our budgets get cut, and other things get cut too. We don't want that. So why are we talking about competitive analytics? What does it do for us? Competitive analytics gives us 3 things. Number one, it gives us the ability to understand the landscape that we're working in. What's happening out there that we should be paying attention to? Are there trends? Are there commonalities that indicate, hey, we should be doing this too? Second, to see what's working, specific strategies, tactics, techniques, tips that we can glean from competitors in our field, or maybe even not in our field, and import those practices as best practices of our own in our companies. And the third is finding ideas for inspiration. For those of us who have a role in content marketing, it's very often easy to get stuck in a rut, right? You do the same thing week in and week out, you're curating the same content, writing the same blog posts. You're like, you just want to get stuff off your to-do list. Competitive analysis can open our eyes to other things that can inspire us and make our marketing more effective. So that sounds great. Let's dive into just, looking at what other people are doing, right? Well, let's hold our horses there. There are some things people do wrong with competitive analysis. The first thing people do wrong is they get too casual about it, right? They just start checking out social profiles and swiping through blogs and stuff. It's not Tinder, right? It's not instant decisions. We want to be methodical and thorough and scientific in our competitive analysis. We just don't want to do things kind of randomly and hope for the best. I mean, props to you if it works on Tinder, but definitely doesn't work in competitive analysis. And second, we need to make sure that we have a clear goal in mind and a use case for this data. Remember, we're talking about data-driven competitive analysis, making decisions with data first. A lot of people, when they do competitive analysis, they will just sort of spitball. They'll cover, the conference room wall and post-it notes and have what we call the hippo problem, highest individually paid person's opinion about what they think the competitors are up to. That's not how this works, at least not if you want to use math and science and facts to judge your competitors. When we are talking about data-driven competitive analysis, we mean we're going to make decisions with data first and foremost before we use anything else. So let's talk about a couple models, ways that you can do this competitive analysis. The model that you'll see very frequently in competitive analysis is Porter's 5 forces. You see this a lot in strategic marketing strategy courses and things, and it's a good model. It talks about the bargaining power of buyers and suppliers, the threat of new entrants and substitutes, but where Porter's 5 forces runs into a lot of trouble is it is very difficult, not impossible, very, very difficult to put together all of this in data format, in numerical format, so that you can do more sophisticated analysis. A lot of our marketing data simply doesn't apply here. For example, if you're thinking about organic search and social media, the bargaining power of suppliers does not really have a strong connection to the data that we have available. The system that I prefer is the SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis is much easier to categorize data in. And if you didn't go to business school or take this class, somewhere along the line, SWOT analysis is really simple. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, where almost everybody gets this wrong is they just kind of make it a jumble and just put data all over the place. We want to keep things separate. Strengths and weaknesses are attributes that are our company. They're things that we have under our control. What are we good at? What are we bad at? Opportunities and threats are the inverse, and they are things that are out of our control, that our competitors are doing. Is where our competitive data goes. Opportunities are what competitors are doing well, are what competitors are doing poorly, and threats are things that our competitors are doing well. And it's important to map these out with data and keep it very clean so that you can see that our strengths open the door to opportunities, things our competitors are weak at, right? Our weaknesses let competitors take advantage of our gaps, and that's what creates threats, right? So we need to make sure that we are keeping the data separate and that our conceptual understanding of the SWOT analysis is strong so that we use it properly and can make good judgments from it. So what data are we going to need? We're talking a lot about data. What do we need to do this kind of competitive analysis? The short version is anything we can get our hands on, right? Content data, rich media data, SEO data, audience data, social media data, ad data, public relations data, news coverage data, television data, number of billboards on the road data, whatever we can get a hold of, we want to get. But here's the condition. It has to be apples to apples. If we have data about our company and we can't get comparable, identical data about a competitor, we can't use it. Not if we want to have a valid analysis. Real simple example. If we decide we were going to be doing this analysis and we use Google Analytics data in our analysis of our strengths, we can't see a competitor's Google Analytics. We can't see what's going on behind the scenes. And so we would come up with very flawed analysis if we were to use that data. We want to make sure that we are spending a lot of time getting apples to apples data. Second thing that we need to be aware of is that most people, when they do competitive analysis, they kind of just back the truck up and pour data all over our desk. I was looking at this terrible analysis done by an agency, and it was 70 slides, just copy and paste from various tools. No analysis, no insights, not even an executive summary. It's just like literally somebody pukes data all over the slide deck. No, it just wasn't helpful. One of the things we have to do with competitive analysis, if we wanted it to be useful, is to calibrate against an outcome that is meaningful. Now, here's the catch. Again, remember, our rule is apples to apples. We need to have something that is meaningful for ourselves, but also that we can see for a competitor. The metric that I recommend we benchmark against is branded organic search. This is when somebody goes to Google and types in your company by name, or types in a competitor by name. When someone searches for trust insights, for example, they're searching for a very specific reason. They want to know more about the company, the people who work here, services we offer, etc., as opposed to searching for marketing analytics agency, right? That's very generic. That could mean a lot of things, and that's more of a curiosity query than it is an intent query. When someone searches for Toyota Prius or Tesla Model 3, they have very clear intent, and so those are things that we can see with tools like Google Trends and various SEO tools, and we can get apples to apples comparison on. So that is one of the things we want to benchmark against. Now, once we have established that benchmark, and if you have a better benchmark, I would love to hear it. Leave it in the comments below. We then want to look at what other data we have that we've collected, apples to apples, that has a mathematical relationship to branded search. This is how we do competitive analysis. This is how you should be doing it. Identifying what other variables that you have access to that are apples to apples that have a correlation to branded organic search volume. If somebody is searching for my company more over time, what could be driving that? That's what we want to analyze. So this is very abstract, right? You're probably like, okay, so I get it, but show me how it works. Glad you asked. Let's do a walkthrough. I'm going to use two companies that are well known in the marketing tool space, Agorapulse and Hootsuite. Disclosure, we're an Agorapulse customer. Actually, we're customers of Agorapulse. You're going to see TalkWalker, IBM, all these different companies we do have a business relationship with, just disclosing that. And again, branded organic search is that metric that says where there's smoke, there's fire. If someone's searching for one of these companies a lot, that is a good indicator that people are going to want to eventually buy something from them. If you were to look in your own search data, I would bet you a small pastry, $5 value or less, that organic search is a substantial part of what drives your traffic and possibly what drives your conversions. So it's a good metric to use. So a very quick run through, we go through checking Google Trends. Is anyone even searching for these brands? If the answer is no, then we obviously can't use that as our response variable, as our outcome that we care about. But fortunately, we see both Hootsuite and Agorapulse are getting lots of searches. Good to know. The next thing we need to do is gather up all that data, right? We need to pull all that data in, whatever we can get a hold of. So I might use a tool like TalkWalker, for example, and that would give me the ability to vacuum up Instagram, Facebook, Twitter data, YouTube data, all these different social and media platforms. I could use Google News to grab news articles. I could use a tool like Ahrefs to pull in backlink data, keyword data, social share data, all sorts of stuff, and gather the materials I need to do this analysis. The analysis itself has a name. It's a formal process called exploratory data analysis, where we start with that goal. What are we trying to determine? We do our data collection, and we have to go through and clean and prepare our data, attribute classification, initial analysis, requirements, preparation, feature engineering, and modeling. One of the things that you won't find in most of these tools when you're looking at different types of content are things like emotion, tone, sentiment, day of week by name. So those are all things that we want to engineer or extract from the data. And again, we're essentially just building a really big spreadsheet, one for each company, or a table. It's because it's not necessarily a spreadsheet form. And you don't necessarily need to use advanced tools to do this. You could do this whole thing in Excel. You will be miserable and it will take you forever, but it can be done. The better path is to use more sophisticated data science and machine learning tools. In this case, RStudio and the R programming language, which is open source and free of cost, to gather the data and perform that exploratory data analysis process, to massage it all, combine it all, dedupe it if you need to, things like that. In this case, for these two companies, when doing an analysis that results in looking at 70 variables for each company versus their branded organic search. Now, how do you do that correlation, that regression analysis? Again, we want to use really good tools to do this. You could do it in Excel. I wouldn't recommend it. The tool there I would use would be something from IBM Watson, a tool called IBM Watson Studio. Take that huge table that we were just talking about, and we stuff it into Watson and say, hey, Watson, I care about branded organic search. You do all the mixing and matching and correlation testing and tell me which of these variables has that mathematical relationship to the outcome that I care about. And it will sit here and do it. This one took about 2.5 minutes to crank through, and it spits out a lovely little chart that says these are the things that seem to be important. For Agorapulse, in their content, the emotion of joy, which comes from a sentiment library, seems to have a positive relationship with that branded organic search. Same for longer posts on Facebook. For Hootsuite, likes on Facebook posts, favorites on Twitter posts, and retweets seems to have a relationship of some kind with that outcome we care about. Now, here's a critical part of the process. A lot of people will say, great, that's the answer. Let's go and measure those things. We have proven correlation. We have not in any way proven causation. So our next step is to continually test and analyze to see if there is, in fact, that causative relationship. Certainly, we can't do that with Hootsuite because we don't work there, right? We're pretending we work at Agorapulse. But we can test if in the Agorapulse accounts, using more joyful language increase the outcome, the branded organic search outcome. If the answer is yes, then we've done some testing, then we can prove causality. We can say, yes, this leads to that. With our competitors, even though we don't work there, we can look at those variables and measure them over time and see if that correlation continues to be to strengthen. And if we see changes in the correlation, increase in strength, and we see the corresponding response variable also increase in strength proportional to the correlating variables, it's not causative because we didn't do a scientifically controlled experiment, but it's pretty close. Once we have that information, then we can look at digging into those things that are proven causal, those variables that are proven causal, and do some analysis. So we could take our SWOT analysis and say, let's plug in the data points that we've proven causation or extremely strong correlation with over time. So if we're Agorapulse, our strengths are that joyful, positive content and longer Facebook posts. Great, we can create some more longer Facebook posts. On the other hand, we know our weak spot is our posts are not getting enough action. It's not getting enough engagement because we didn't see any of those engagement variables in what Watson spit out. Likewise, Hootsuite has Facebook likes, Twitter likes, retweets. That's their strength. How do we counteract that, right? Because that's that presents a challenge to us. What we didn't see in their analysis was any emotions or tone or sentiment, as an indicator of strength in their content. So they may be weak there. This is how we plan our strategy now. Now that we know what variables go in the SWOT analysis, we can plan a strategy around them. We can do more of the stuff that works, the joyful content. We can figure out how do we get more engagement to mitigate that weakness and to blunt Hootsuite's advantage, and then map down, make focus on more emotional content, and see if we can take away some of their engagement. How would you do that? Well, you know what data you have, right? We could look at Hootsuite's top data and say, dig into the top 10% of their most liked posts. What do they have in common? Are they certain topics? Is it a certain language, turns of phrase, certain types of media? Is it a certain type of post type? And we can test that on our accounts to see, okay, Hootsuite's really good at engagement. If we do the things that they do that get them high engagement, can we boost our engagement up while maintaining our advantage in the language that we use, the joyful language? Likewise, we can use tools like TalkWalker to keep an eye on those metrics, those public accessible metrics around Hootsuite, and measure them and see, oh, look, that something they just published something that got them high engagement. Great, let's keep an eye on that and have rapid response in place so that if they publish something that's really hot, we can do more of it. We can even go after the things that get them more engagement. We could look at key opinion leaders or influencers around their top content and say, hey, are these folks that work for them, or are they third parties? And if they're third parties, can we offer them a better deal? Can we recruit them? Can we turn them to our side and take away some of those competitive advantages? Again, this is really the most important part about competitive analysis. Not the analysis, but what are we going to do with it? How can we use this information to make changes to our program? So that's a good walkthrough of the process. And again, we used a subset of all the data that is out there. You will be using much, much more of it. Anything that you have that's available that is public and legal to obtain should be in your analysis. You're going to need some skills to pull this off. 6 different types of skills. And they may come in one person, a couple people, a team, maybe even a department, depending on your company and who it has available. You're going to need someone who has good stats and math background, the ability to do things like statistical significance testing and understanding what is and is not statistically significant. You'll need someone who, if you want to use the tools like R and some of the tools inside Watson Studio, you're going to need someone with technical experience, coding background maybe. You need somebody who has a scientific perspective, who understands the scientific method and can test and develop repeatable, reproducible results. That's a gap that a lot of marketers have. They don't know how to do those things, and they kind of leap to conclusions that are not true. You need someone who has that domain expertise and that business expertise to be able to offer, looking at the data, but what a competitor's doing, and say, I know what that means, or I know why that's probably the case, or I know what was happening in the industry at that point that could explain some of the anomalies in the data, because all these other folks can find the anomalies, but they can't necessarily explain them and then provide guidance about whether that should or should not be in the model. And of course, you need the data engineering skill set to be able to get all this data, wrangle it, and get it into one place so that it can be analyzed. When it comes to tools, again, we've talked about many of them as we've been going on. The first one, of course, is IBM Watson Studio. There is a free-to-try edition that it gives you 50 hours a month of compute time, which for a competitive analysis project is actually plenty. You shouldn't need to be going into the paid levels on that front. And if you want to get more advanced, using those tools like R and Python and SQL to wrangle and process the data. Again, you can do some of this in tools like Excel and stuff, but it's not the best experience, right? It's pretty painful. So these tools give you those options to be able to really crunch the data very quickly and get to answers faster. So to recap, because we've covered an awful lot in the last few minutes here. First, the framework we want to use is the SWOT analysis, used properly. And we want to use data in the SWOT analysis to do our competitive analysis, not guesswork, not people's opinions, not imagining what our audiences say, but actually using real data to look at our own strengths and weaknesses and to look at our competitors' strengths and weaknesses based on the analysis we've done to determine those things that lead to a meaningful outcome, which for today has been branded organic searches. Second, we want to calibrate against that meaningful public metric. Don't do competitive analysis if your data is not apples to apples. Discard any variables that you have in your data set that are not evenly distributed among both parties. And third, and most important of all, by far, don't do competitive analysis if you're not going to do anything with the data. It will be just a massive waste of time and effort and money. Analysis without action is a meal you cook and you never eat, right? So if you're going to do the analysis, have very clear goals up front about how you're going to use it, and then actually use it. I can't tell you the number of times. I had this one client a few years back, and they asked for this really advanced competitive predictive analysis. We went through all this and did a thorough, in-depth analysis of them and said, hey, these are the days or the weeks of the year in which your competitor is going to be strongest, where you're weakest, and being able to measure and say, these are the topics that you should be creating content around. And it was very thorough. They understood it. They said, okay, yeah, that's really terrific. I know when this competitor is going to be strong. Great. I can, either ramp up ad dollars or go somewhere else. And then they never did it. They took it, put it back on the shelf, and it collected dust. And unsurprisingly, 6 months later, they gave it their notice. And we're like, well, why? And they said, well, we didn't see any results. I had to bite my tongue. Like, well, of course you didn't see any results. You didn't do anything with the data we gave you. You just let it collect dust. You didn't change what you're doing. And of course your competitor, which is a larger competitor, beat the stuffing out of you. You have to use this data. If you don't use it, it doesn't mean anything. Seth Godin has a great expression for this. If you're not going to change what you eat or how often you work out, don't get on the scale. Same is true here. If you're not going to do anything with the analysis, don't bother doing it in the first place. Just, do something else. Just resort to guessing, but don't invest the time and the energy and the effort in the analysis only to be disappointed. And if your boss comes to you and asks, like, hey, I need a competitive analysis on this, it's okay to ask, and however you're comfortable asking within your work relationship. Great, what are we going to use it for? How are we going to use it? And if he just says, oh, well, we just need it for the board meeting or the slide deck or whatever, in your head, you can say, okay, I'm going to do the minimum amount of work possible to get a competent result that's good enough for the board that will never actually use it. As opposed to the boss saying, well, we need it so that we can calibrate next week's ad spend and next quarter's marketing plan and information for the social media team about what to look at. Great. This is clearly a goal-oriented mindset. And you're going to invest the time to build that analysis because it's going to get used. Someone's going to make good use of it. So that is the last and most important point. Even if you do the Excel version, even if you do a slimmed down version of this framework, as long as you're using it to make changes, that's the important part. If you have additional questions after we're done here, please feel free to join our free Slack group over at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. Would love to continue the conversation with you. It's free to join. And if you're familiar with Slack, you know exactly what you're getting into. If you're not, it's basically a big asynchronous chat room. Thank you for your attention. Been a pleasure, and I hope to talk to you soon. Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.